All right, so we'll begin our Q&A. I did get one question before, so we'll go ahead and start with that one, which was simply, how do we know how many people are on Zoom? Which actually is a great question, because it gets at some broader things than just how we're tracking Zoom. So even before the pandemic, we track everything in our services. We have a list of a collection of parish worship registries. So every service that is worshiped here, and even actually some services, so I will mark if there's a service for someone who is sick, or anything like that, I will mark that in our service registry too. Now, generally, I'm not putting people's houses on there. I'm not putting any personal information. Generally, that comes up as private residence. So, like I said, we track all of that information. Everyone, we count how many people have received communion as best we can. We count everyone who's here for every service. So we have a good picture of that. Now, what we've done since the pandemic, how we count things has changed just a little bit. So we're still counting, obviously, the people who are here in person. And part of what we end up doing that with too is that all of that information we collect in that book, and at the end of the year, as we've tallied everything, that goes into our parochial report. So every parish in the Episcopal Church throughout the country submits a parochial report to the national church. So you can actually go on, they've changed it. I think the format's a little harder to read in some ways now, unfortunately, but that you can go on and you can see any church in the Episcopal Church. You can see how their numbers have shifted over the years, which is really helpful for us as clergy to be able to look at, and maybe just more of a like, oh, I'm kind of interested in that for anyone else. But for the parochial report post-pandemic, it's changed a little bit. So because we have all these online numbers that we're looking at now, and that gives us a sense of who's actually participating, we include those numbers as well. And that's one of those things that isn't still standardized. There's a question about how we do that. For how we're keeping track of those numbers, so we keep track of Zoom for every service, which is usually whoever is on doing that information. I will ask them afterwards, how many people do we have on Zoom, so I can mark that down. We also, or at least I'm including the Facebook, our live stream too. And how I've done that is kind of shifted from all the different churches I've been at during the pandemic, and what I've learned. So initially, at the start of the shutdown, what I did was take those numbers as I saw them, because I was just live streaming at that church. So it'd be like a little thing in the corner that would tell you who's looking. Problem with just doing those numbers is, I'd see like, okay, 2 or 3, and then I'd look afterwards, once I stopped the recording, and it would be like 20 people viewed this. I was like, oh, okay, that's a pretty big difference. So what I've started doing with that is give like the numbers I've got for our Facebook, for our live stream, are generally like slightly after we've stopped the service. Because a lot of times people will watch, they'll pause it, they'll do other things, and that gives a broader, better stroke of who all is actually looking, is paying attention to that. So that's kind of the broad question of how do we figure out who's online for that. And like I said, we track that, we put it down. There's a little note, there's a little extra thing you can have in the parish service registry, which is in the back in the sacristy. So anyone who wants to look at that can. And in fact, I think we have, it's open to anyone. Yeah, it's just open back there. Anybody can look at that. There's I don't have a problem with people looking at that. In past years, I'm trying to remember how far back that one goes. I want to say that one's till 2016. Because if you have a lot of services, this fill up quick. The ones from past years, before 2016, would be in the office, where we've got all of our records there. So that if you're ever curious and want to check that out, you can. And just, there may be a key for that, if I recall. You can always just ask Susan or myself for that. And that's pretty, none of this is different for us than any other Episcopal church. This is pretty standard across the board. So that's the first question. Got another one? So what are we taking from that? What are we deriving from that information for statistics? So specifically, one of the things that the parochial report is looking for, and again, that's a report we send every year, kind of gives the numbers for the state of the church. What we're looking at there mostly, not exclusively, but mostly, is our average Sunday attendance, which basically how you do that is you tally up all of the Sunday services each week, how many people were there, and then you just divide that by the week for the year. How I do that to be easier on myself is, and you can see this, so you can actually track the flow for the year, at least the way that I do it. Different clergy will track it slightly, may look at that slightly differently. Some wait till just the very end of the year, but I kind of like a sense of where we're going. So that I'll, like at the end, so since we have 2 Sunday services, I'll wait till the second service to tally that, and I'll just go in with a calculator, usually on my phone, and just do the total for how many people have been at our Sunday services for the entire year. And then I'll divide that by the week that this is at. And there's a nice little convenient spot for that. So that's not just something that like I have in my head. That's from week to week. I just look at, okay, what was it last week? Okay, what is it this week? And divide by that and get what we have. Before, I haven't looked at today, but just as an example, we've been at 32 for our average Sunday for the year here at St. Luke's.
And that's both 8 and 10.
Yeah, that's including, so average Sunday attendance includes all of our services, 8 and 10. When we were doing the Zoom service, that got included in there. Recently, we had a baptism that was post. Generally, baptisms baptisms are meant to be a public service. We want to do that. This is a particular pastoral need, so that got included in there. So yeah, it's not just our 8 and 10. It's if there were other services we had on Sunday, those would count. And actually, the way it's set up too, if we were doing Saturday evening services, we would count those as well. Most Episcopal churches don't do Saturday evening services. It's kind of the same as doing a vigil. So the Easter Vigil would count as that, because our clergy aren't monastic. Typically, we have families that want to have us around on Saturdays. So that's why most Episcopal churches don't do a Saturday evening service, but if we did, and there are a few that do, that would count towards the average Sunday attendance as well. And just so I'm mindful of time. Okay, we're still good.
I assume that the numbers are still used to classify the size of the parish to therefore determine the rector's salary.
Yeah, so that's a good question. So our is average Sunday attendance still used to determine size of parish, salary, things like that? And I'm just repeating the questions so that things are good for folks viewing this later, so that we don't necessarily have to, they can hear and everything and all that. At one point in time, I knew our diocese's current practice as far as that. I don't remember it as of now. Some places it's more contingent on. There's certainly like a diocesan standard of like this is the standard practice. Parishes could give more for salary if they chose to, and there are some churches that do. Yeah, as far as like the size of the parish, it is a helpful mark, the average Sunday attendance. We do in the parochial reports include the numbers for baptized members of the parish. I find that's often less helpful personally. In some churches, you'll see like there'll be a huge drop, because that's not typically, if there's a huge drop in what's being reported for the baptized members, it means that the rector went in and cleaned the books out, because sometimes those aren't always as accurate. Not necessarily because people have died, although that's one, but people have moved on, or people, and that's a helpful thing to be able to say, to call somebody up, hey, we haven't seen you in a while. What's going on? How are things going? Because sometimes people have moved to a completely different state, and they're like, well, I'm going to this church now. And that's an opportunity you can ask, oh, well, do you want to move your membership to a different church? Which again is fine, there's nothing wrong with that, but that would be a reason for doing it. But yeah, the average Sunday attendance, I feel like, gives a better sense of who's active, like what are the numbers for people who are active.
That would be my follow-up question. I just looked at the 2021 report a couple weeks ago.
Yeah.
348 members of this church.
Okay.
And Sunday attendance is 32.
Yeah, that sounds about right. And that's about what we're at right now. Yeah. I mean, that's what I remember from putting in there before. Yeah. And it would have been from what I remember, it would have been a little bit bigger before the pandemic. I think that's pretty standard for, I'd say for better or for worse, right now. Yeah, and then, how do we reach people? I think that's going to be the next thing. And part of it is going to be calling people up and seeing, like, how are you doing? And not just me, like everybody doing that. And that's really, really important. As our altar guild have probably heard me say more than anybody else, if you want to have people here, like, I can say things to folks, but that's very different for me if you all are saying things to people like, hey, we haven't seen you in a while, how are things going? That means so much more than if it's coming from me. And that's one of the things I've found in churches in the past. That's how to get people back. My hope too, I think I think some of the nervousness, or maybe this is just what I can relate to. We have stayed at medium risk for our county here for most of the summer. And we were at low risk for a good bit of the spring. So that may be a concern to people. I can certainly understand if it is, for those of you who are staying at home. My other hope is that, I know people are able to get the new booster for the variants for COVID, as well as a flu shot. I know some of my family members have done that. I'm hoping that the access to that will make people feel more comfortable coming in. So if you're watching online too, and for those here, get those as soon as you can. Those the upstated booster, the flu shot too, because that's going to be important as well. So I think those are ways too. If we're all doing it, if you guys are doing it online, hopefully that'll make you all feel safer. Hopefully it'll make everybody else feel safer too. But other than that, I guess if for getting people back in here, I think it's I think that's an important step is reaching it. And just finishing up one more thought for the next question. The church size, I think, can be helpful. And this is something we'll hopefully talk about some in our conversations as we move forward. Certainly something, I plan to talk about a little bit more too. I think church size can help us see, there's this whole classification system. And I can never remember exactly what numbers go with which. Really small churches would be family size. Pastoral size would be slightly bigger than that. And then it's program and resource that I always mix up that are bigger sizes. There's more as far as programming that can be done once the church is a little bit bigger than the pastoral size. But there's a lot that you can do in the pastoral size too, and family size even, that you can't do at a larger church. And I'm saying this as somebody who grew up in a 1,000 member parish with a lot of money that could do a lot of big things. And as somebody who has served at a lot of smaller churches. My first church pre-pandemic was 38 average Sunday attendance. So there are things you can do. You can't do some things in a smaller church that you can do at a larger church. But there are some things you can do in a smaller church that you can't do at a larger church. And I think particularly for us at St. Luke's, we've had history as a larger church. We, even before the pandemic, we were shrinking. We can mourn what we can't do anymore. But I think a better way of looking at it is what can we do that we couldn't do before? So I think that's something, particularly as we go into our conversations, that's something to just keep in mind as we move forward is what can we do now with where we're at? That's something we'll be discerning, hopefully together. And then, okay, back to, we had another question.
You had actually talked about the vaccinated and
Yeah.
this level. And I was just thinking in terms of part of perhaps maybe our welcoming message to the outside community is that, we welcome you to all, we encourage you to get the vaccine so that we can all feel safer together
Yeah,
Really have this be a safe space, not only spiritually, but physically as well. I
Yeah.
don't want to go too far into it, but again, messaging. is
Yeah.
Very important in terms of, showing that. we can see.
yeah. No, that was a good point. And just to kind of reiterate for our folks online, yeah, we want to be welcoming, and part of our realization of being welcoming is making sure we're all getting vaccinated and staying healthy and I mean, one of the great things about what we have now too, just as an addition to that, with our technology, if you're sick, you can stay home and not miss the service, which I think is really important. And that's something normally with my sort of Southern wanting to be polite and everything, would downplay this and say, maybe we weren't as good at that before. I know we weren't good at that before, about staying home when we were sick. Because I can think of times when I was a lay person that I didn't stay home from church when I was sick. And looking back on that now, I should have. So that's a great thing we have now with all of our technology that we've invested in, is that if you are sick, you can stay home and still be part and still be fed spiritually. So that's an important part too. And yeah, I would agree with, and I hope people have been hearing, whether you've been here or whether you've been online, I hope you remember hearing me say that too, is that please get vaccinated. If you haven't been, please stay up to date as the CDC recommends. As I've often said before, part of that is, living into, St. Luke, the tradition is that St. Luke was a physician or the equivalent of that day. As a PK, a physician's kit, that's really important for me too, is, listen to our doctors. Well, not just being a PK, but being married to a biomedical engineer. That health aspect is so important. And that is, I think that's a great way that we can be welcoming and, to everybody and to, make sure we're doing what we can to keep everybody safe. And it is important to note that the CDC has shifted some of the wording is a little bit different, particularly for where we're at for medium risk. But one of the big change, at least as far as I've seen it, for what the CDC is recommending, because I've been trying to keep this as up to date on this as I can be, and as knowledgeable as I can be without having that good sense of knowledge all the time, is that what I'm seeing for the CDC is the emphasis is still on, and maybe a little more on, if you're immunocompromised, talk to your doctors, make sure you're staying safe. There's been talk I've seen in the media of less of a focus on unvaccinated. I haven't really seen that. What I see in the CDC saying is that make sure it's still important to make sure you're up to date on things. And that includes your flu vaccination too. That was something I used to be really bad about. And then part of it was really my wife saying, okay, but you may be fine if you get the flu, but you can pass it on to somebody else. And when you protect yourself from getting sick, you're protecting other people from getting sick. So that's become an important part of my fall routine. And like I said, I hope it is for all of you as well. Okay. So I'm gonna try to do like speed round, because we're at 4 minutes, and I do want to keep us very tightly on 30 minutes as we move forward. So are there any other questions anybody has? I'll try to answer as quickly.
Sunday school, what's the direction of that?
Yeah, I'll speak to that specifically here at St. Luke's. For the kids, I don't know. It is really the answer I have to give. We had a small but faithful contingency last fall for the kids in Sunday school, and that kind of fell by the wayside in the spring. And we've had conversations with our leaders for that, and I've heard back from some and not from others. So that is a pretty big question mark right now. I'm hoping we can get something in for that. But one of the things I'm hoping that we can maybe fill that, well, let me first talk about what we're going to be doing for Christian formation for adults, is our conversations. And probably what they'll look like will still be in here. I'm thinking that having those here in the nave will be best to involve as many people as possible. And depending on how the recording and stuff looks like, although we won't be recording those conversations, because we will have a Zoom component to them, so more people can be involved. And it'll probably look like how I have it set up today, except that the iPad will be turned around, so it'll feel more like a conversation. I'll probably be sitting in one of these seats over here as well. But the idea of those conversations is to talk about our past, but to also talk about it so that we can move to our future. I keep learning things with Larry Snyder's time here in particular. And so I kind of thought I knew everything, and then I keep having conversations and learning more about it. But one of the things I had hoped is that I'm hoping still is we can have some time to talk about that, to just get it out there, to let people mourn what happened there. And also it does help for me to know more about that too. But one of the things I'm finding is our shrinking, which is slow and over time, I should say. There's no panic, but there has been a slow over time shrink. And are the issues we're gonna have to talk with Anglican service folk. A lot of those things stem from Larry Snyder's time here. So I think talking about that first is going to help, hopefully, in all of our other conversations. But again, next week, I really want to start with, what are the traditions we've had at this church that we've loved? I want to start with that because it gives us something positive to focus on. And I think that's important to get us started in these conversations. And then, so the conversations is going to be one piece for our Christian formation. The other piece that I don't know exactly when this is going to start, but my hope for this is that at some point this fall, we'll have something on Wednesdays, and those will be recorded. It's not going to be every week. It'll be recorded, it'll be on Zoom, and that's to make it easier for folks so that can't commute, that want to be part of that. To make it a little easier on me too, to be honest. And hopefully it won't conflict with choir. Yeah, that's a good point. So I'll keep that in mind too. But those will be recorded. I will say that they will be recorded. And what those Wednesday night things that I'm hoping to focus on with those is one of the things I've seen for both our kids and adults is Old Testament knowledge, that we need some more of that. And so I want to kind of do an all ages thing, so to kind of fill the gap that may be there with Sunday school, but to also do something that's going to be helpful for the adults. Is I want to talk about some of the Old Testament, just go through that in a way that, like I said, is going to reach all ages. So it'll cover the basics. That's not to say that we won't get into some more difficult things. I do plan on, last year with our community formation sessions, which were fall leading up to winter. I think it started in 2021 and ended towards the beginning of 2022, if I recall correctly. You can find those all online, by the way. We talked about David and Bathsheba for that. Even with the all ages, I really think it's important to talk about that event in scripture anyways. It's actually included in the Children's Illustrated Bible, but we'll talk about that in a way that's more accessible to kids. And by that, I mean, I'm going to rely very heavily on what VeggieTales has done for David and Bathsheba, because they did a great job with it, which is an all accessible thing. I think it's King George and the Rubber Ducky is some title like that. Again, it's a great way to cover it. But so we'll cover difficult issues in the Old Testament, but the idea is we'll cover it in a way that anybody can listen to it. And again, those will be available online afterwards. So if we can't figure out something with choir and with everybody else, everybody will be able to take part in that too. So that's where we're at with Sunday school. You know, I'm hoping as families start coming back, that'll shift too. And I do hope families will come back. And you know, again, for people that are watching this later, I mean, if you guys have thoughts too, please let me know. But folks watching this later, if there's something that we can do to make you feel more comfortable coming back, you know, not just with the vaccination, but, you know, if we do a Sunday where everybody can just come in their pajamas, you know, like, but seriously, like, if that's something that and people come in their rollers. No, but I think, you know, if you know, yeah, and within reason, like we don't want to see people in their boxer shorts, you know, like, but like, you know, your athletic wear, your lounge wear, your comfort, you know, I mean, if there are things like that can reach out to you guys who, you know, aren't yet back with us in person, let us know. Because I'm very open to a lot of things. So we want to know what's going to help you with your spiritual growth. Yeah.
We live in a world of misinformation.
Yeah.
Fear, uncertainty. If there is any way that we can magnify the truth, in my mind, that's what
Yeah. Yeah, so as just a final, maybe final thing, definitely final thing for our time. Threw a little bit over, and I apologize for that. As far as, there's the beauty of the internet is that we have access to information we didn't have access to within the lifetimes of everybody in this room, and myself included. But at the same time, there's a lot out there that's just not as good. And, you know, as the church, you know, how do we help with the disinformation, not spreading disinformation, spreading truth? my hope is that you find it from places like, the stuff I'm putting out there online. So the Rev Trey's thoughts.blogspot.com, is where I've got all my stuff. I hope that's a great resource to people. All of our church leaders have stuff out there. Our bishop has a lot on his social media. Our presiding bishop has a lot on his social media and just video addresses that he has out there. The Archbishop of Canterbury, Justin Welby, he's got a lot of stuff out there as well. So you've got stuff from, and not to play favorites, so we've got stuff from our bishop, Daniel Gutierrez. We've got stuff from our presiding bishop, Michael Curry. We've got stuff from the Archbishop of Canterbury, who all of us in the Anglican Communion are connected with, Justin Welby. They've all got great stuff out there. So, if you're looking for good, true things, check them out as well. So, thank you all. I'll stop our recording and see you all next week.